back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is my second deck tech from Phyrexia, All Will Be One. And this one is going to be Glissa Sunslayer, the new Glissa we got from this set. 1 black and a green, Phyrexian Zombie Elf, 3/3, first strike, death touch, fantastic combination of abilities there. When Glissa Sunslayer deals combat damage to a player, choose one. You draw a card and you lose 1 life, destroy target enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. So one of these abilities is not like the other. And as I talked about in the spoiler video, those first 2 abilities there, drawing a card or destroying enchantment, are obviously things that you can do in any commander game, and you're always going to want to do so. And when you get in for combat damage with your commander, there is likely going to be the situation where you want to get a Smothering Tithe or a Rhystic Study or something off the table, but you're not going to build your deck around that, right? The ability here that you want to build around is the removing counters one, and this is a deck I've been wanting to put together for a while. I've had a few ideas for it, and so when I saw this commander, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to be doing that. So that is the theme of the deck. Before we get to that though, you always got to be looking at your commander's creature types, and our commander is a Phyrexian Zombie Elf, and of course Zombie and Elf have a ton of tribal support, obviously in black and green, which is the colors that we are in. The support we want here though is the stuff that is going to help our commander get in for damage, right? Because obviously that's what we want our commander to be doing as much as possible. So I put Zombie Master in the deck, and I put Eladamri, Lord of the Leaves, in the deck. Both phenomenal fits. Really, if your commander is a zombie or an elf, both of these are going to be fantastic fits for 2 great reasons that both cards will help with. Eladamri, Lord of Leaves, is going to give our commander Forest Walk, which of course is going to make it a lot harder to block. Anyone who has Forest, it's going to be unblockable. And Glissa's ability says deals combat damage to a player, and then we get to do those abilities. Doesn't matter which player we're dealing damage to. I mean, there might be some players that we prefer to attack, but we can hit any player and then trigger our commander's ability. So we just attack the player who's got Forest, and of course Zombie Master is going to give our zombies Swamp Walk, so the same will apply with swamps there. Zombie Master also gives our zombies pay 1 black and regenerate, so that's fantastic to protect our commander. And of course Eladamri says other elves have Shroud, so now our commander can have Shroud as well. We don't really need to be putting a whole lot of stuff on our commander. The Shroud might hurt us a little bit, not a ton. I think ultimately it's definitely worth it to put that in there, because the stuff we want to be putting on our commander isn't going to be relevant if our commander isn't going to be blocked anyway, right? Now, the stuff that we do want to be putting on our commander, if we don't have our Eladamri in play, is stuff that is going to give it trample. Like I've said many times before on this channel, First Strike, Death Touch, and Trample are such a phenomenal combination of abilities. You can check out my Combat Magic Rules video where I go into specific examples there of how well it works together. It is pretty much a guarantee that our commander is going to be getting in for combat damage to a player if it has First Strike, Death Touch, and Trample. So I did put some stuff in here that will be giving our commander Trample. Rancor, of course, probably one of the best all time for doing this. Also, Vorak Battlehorns is a great one. 2 mana equipment. Equipped creature has Trample and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, which is really, really good. So again, it's a guarantee that we're getting in for damage if our Vorak Battlehorns is on there, because our opponent only can block with 1 creature. We only have to deal lethal damage to that creature, and then we get to trample over the rest, so we only have to deal 1 damage to that creature, because of course our commander has Death Touch. So with the Vorak Battlehorns on our commander, we're guaranteed going to be getting the trigger we want. I also threw Nemesis Mask in here because I thought, why not? 3 mana equipment, all creatures able to block equipped creature do so. We might not be getting in for damage with our commander, but this can be sort of a pseudo board wipe almost. As long as our opponent blocks with 3 creatures or less, we are guaranteed to be killing them all, right? We only have to deal 1 damage to each of them. So if our opponent has 3 creatures, we can throw our Nemesis Mask on our commander, because of course our commander deals 3 damage. So we can assign 1 damage to each of those creatures, killing them all. And again, our Glissa will likely survive, assuming that none of our opponent's creatures have First Strike. We are in the remove counter theme, and surprisingly, there's actually quite a bit of support here, right? So Ferropede and Hex Parasite are going to be great inclusions in the deck. Ferropede really is a fantastic creature that I think could be used in a lot more decks. 3 mana artifact creature insect 1/1. It can't be blocked, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to remove a counter from any permanent. That's always going to be usable in a commander game, I think. Hex Parasite, 1 mana artifact creature insect, and it's a 1/1, and you pay X and a Phyrexian black mana to remove up to X counters from target permanent, and your Hex Parasite is going to get +1/+0 until end of turn for each one removed that way. So this is a way we can remove a whole bunch of counters all at once, which we might want to be doing. Either of these will be great here. Sometimes we'll only want to remove one counter. Sometimes we'll want to remove a bunch all at once, and it's going to be nice to have other options other than just our commander's ability, right? There's a bunch of stuff in this deck we want to be removing counters from, and it is also likely that our opponents will have something that we might want to remove counters from, right? Maybe they got +1/+1 counters on their creatures. Maybe they got a planeswalker on the table. So having lots of different options like this is going to be great. I also got Power Conduit and Thrall Parasite. Thrall Parasite removes a counter from target non-land permanent. So again, we can use this on our opponents as well. Power Conduit, we will tap to remove a counter from a permanent we control, which we will have a lot, and we want to be removing counters. That's how this deck is built. But also we get the added bonus of we can put a charge counter on target artifact, or we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. I also have some counter sweepers, I guess you could call them, like Aether Snap and Thief of Blood. These are just going to be getting rid of all the counters in play. And the added bonus is our Thief of Blood will get that many +1/+1 counters on it, and it's flying, so it's going to be a giant flyer. And then our Aether Snap also exiles all tokens as well as removing all counters. So nice little added bonus there. So those are sort of the board wipe versions of what our commander is doing. And I also have Nesting Grounds in the deck, which is going to be moving counters. This is going to be a card that I imagine is going to be spiking in price. There's a whole bunch of commanders from this set that want to have a Nesting Grounds. So run out and get your copy now if you don't have one already, because I think this card is going to get used in a lot of decks in the near future. Just pay 1 and tap, move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Activate this ability only time you can cast a sorcery. So this is great in the deck for a number of reasons. First of all, we do want to be moving counters around for various reasons, which I will get to. The other interesting thing here is you can move a counter from a target permanent you control onto another target permanent, not that you control necessarily. You can actually move counters onto your opponent's creatures. For example, say if you have a -1/-1 counter on your creature, you can now move that -1/-1 counter onto your opponent's creature. This really is a fantastic, versatile land that probably could go in a lot more decks. It is super unique in what it's doing. Another super unique land that is an obvious fit in this deck is Dark Depths. People have been building around this card in their decks for many, many years since it first came out. Legendary Snowland enters the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. Pay 3 and remove an ice counter from Dark Depths, but it's likely we won't be doing that ever. When Dark Depths has no ice counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do, create a legendary 2020 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible named Merit Lage. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with this card. This is just an absolute auto-include in this deck, of course, because we have our commander, which could remove these counters 3 at a time, but we have so many other options for removing counters. Again, we just throw our Aether Snap out there. We've now removed all the counters from our Dark Depths in a one-shot. So it doesn't just have to be our commander doing this. There is a lot of help in this deck as well for removing counters. I also did the Saga thing here as well, put a bunch of them in the deck, and really our commander's ability is perfect here because our commander says remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. So we don't have to remove 3. We can remove 1. We can remove 2, right? And with Sagas, of course, you might want different chapters. I got Binding the Old Gods here, Phyrexian Scriptures, both fantastic ones. And they have abilities that we might be wanting to use over and over again, right? So for example, with Binding the Old Gods, that first one, destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls. There's something that would be nice to do over and over again every turn. Phyrexian Scriptures, we can just keep putting +1/+1 counters on our commander, or after our commander commander has become an artifact creature, we can just do that chapter 2 over and over again, destroy all non-artifact creatures, constantly be board wiping our opponents every turn. That seems pretty good. I also got the Eldest Reborn in here, the first Iron Games, both fantastic ones that we can remove those counters to get exactly the effect that we want, forcing our opponents to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker every turn, or forcing them to discard a card. The first Iron Games is probably the best here because there are 4 chapters, so we can stick in those first 3 wherever we like. We can create the human token, I guess. More likely the 2 and the 3 are going to be fantastic here. We can put 3+1/+1 counters on target creature we control, so we can just continually be putting counters on our commander and making it bigger and bigger. Or if we want to draw some cards, well, chapter 3 says if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw 2 cards. So once our commander's power is 4 or greater, we can just sit there doing this every turn. Drawing 2 cards every single turn seems pretty good. I also did the Persist thing here as well. Woodfall Primus and Puppeteer Click, both fantastic cards in a commander game. They get used in decks all the time, whether they fit the theme or not, and they're going to be extra good here because, of course, with Persist, they're going to die, come back into play with a -1/-1 counter on them, and if we can remove that counter, then we can just keep having them come back into play over and over again. And of course, I also threw Cauldron of Souls in this deck because why not? We are in the remove counter theme. We can use this on our commander or any of our other creatures, and then just be removing the counters with our commander or with any of the other options we have. Like I said, there's going to be lots and lots of targets for all these remove counter abilities that we have in the deck. Another great one is Necroplasm, one of my favorite creatures of all time. I just think this is a really fun, interesting creature in a commander game. 1 black, ooze 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on Necroplasm. So when you first put this guy into play, of course, he's not going to have any counters on him. He's just going to be a 1/1. But at the beginning of your end step, destroy each creature with mana value equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on Necroplasm. And I've touted this guy before as a great sweeper for token creatures. And of course, lots of decks out there that are dealing with token creatures, because you're going to play your Necroplasm. On the end step, it's going to have 0 counters on it. So you're going to destroy each creature with mana value equal to the number of counters on your Necroplasm, which is 0. So you're going to destroy all 0 mana value creatures, which usually is going to be all the tokens in play. So it's a great sweeper for those token creatures. Then on our next upkeep, we put a +1/+1 counter on it, and we destroy all the 1 mana value creatures on the end step. And then we repeat the process at 2, and that's where things start to get interesting, because when this thing puts 3 counters on itself, it's going to destroy each creature with mana value 3 on the end step, which of course is itself, right? Necroplasm usually isn't going to get past the 3 mana value. It's really good though for sweeping out all those little creatures. And of course, our commander has a 3 mana value as well, and we probably don't want to be destroying our commander. So at that point, we're going to remove him, right? On our upkeep, we put that 3rd counter on our Necroplasm, then maybe attack with it, attack with our commander, and then probably, I would say, remove all the counters from our Necroplasm with our commander. But again, depending on what you see on the table, might want to only remove 1 or might want to only remove 2, right? If your opponent has a couple of 2 mana creatures in play, you can just remove 1, and then on the end step, destroy all those 2 mana value creatures, because now you're back down to 2 counters, right? So I think this is a great card in the deck. Again, we have so many things that can manipulate the amount of counters on our Necroplasm. It works very similar to the Saga, where we get the effect we want out of it depending on the counters it has. Fraying Line is another fun, interesting fit here. You know, this is why I wanted to go after this commander, because there's just so many fun, interesting things, and you really could do a deep dive here with all the stuff that is putting counters on things and how you can manipulate them. And I thought Fraying Line was a neat fit. This is a really neat card in general. 4 mana artifact. When Fraying Line enters the battlefield, put a rope counter on target creature you control. So likely we'll put this on our commander, right? At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may pay 2. If they do, they put a rope counter on a creature they control. Otherwise, exile Fraying Line and each creature without a rope counter on it, then remove all rope counters from all creatures. So this is going to be a fun card in the deck, because we're going to keep removing the rope counters from our opponent's creatures, right? Remember, our commander and most of the other effects in our deck can remove counters from any permanent it doesn't have to be our stuff. This deck is mostly built around removing stuff from our own permanents, but we can remove stuff from our opponent's permanents as well. So our opponent pays the 2 mana because they don't want to lose their creature, put a rope counter on it. Next opponent does the same. It makes it around to our turn again. Now we can start using our commander and these other effects to start removing the rope counters that they just added on their creatures, and they have to keep doing it, right? They either lose their creatures or they keep paying the 2 to put the rope counters back on. I think it's a funny fit in the deck. Tornado, also a really fun, interesting fit in this deck. This can be a really, really powerful card if you can fit it in the right deck. One of my favorite combos of all time is this with Solemnity, because of course Solemnity isn't going to allow counters on anything. It works extra good with that. I have that in one of my own personal decks, but here it will work as well. Cumulative upkeep in general works really, really well here because of course cumulative upkeep uses age counters. You put the age counter on it, and then for each age counter, you're going to pay whatever the cumulative upkeep cost is. And of course, if you can remove counters, then you don't have to worry about paying it, right? So Tornado, 4 and a green enchantment, has cumulative upkeep, 1 green. So that's the cumulative upkeep we're going to have to keep paying more and more for. But again, we're removing the counters so we don't have to pay it. More importantly though, it also has an ability that adds counters that we don't want on there. 2 and a green, pay 3 life for each velocity counter on Tornado. And of course, it's not going to have any velocity counters on it until you activate this ability. Destroy target permanent. That's pretty good. And put a velocity counter on Tornado. Play this ability only once each turn. So not only are you putting age counters on your Tornado for cumulative upkeep, you're also putting these velocity counters on it, which you also don't want because you have to pay 3 life for each velocity counter on it. So when you first activate that ability, it's pay 3 mana and no life because there's no velocity counters on it. And then of course, we're gonna be removing the counters, right? This is a fantastic removal option in a commander game if you can get those counters off there, right? It gets really, really mana intensive and life intensive if the counters start to accumulate, but just 3 mana to destroy any permanent is pretty fantastic. So I think this is a great inclusion in the deck. And another great inclusion in this deck that a lot of people probably will not like to see is Infernal Darkness. I thought we don't really have a whole lot of win cons in this deck other than attacking with our commander or maybe the Dark Depths. So this is something that can really help us along with that. It's not a fun card to play against for sure, but it is a really good fit here. If you don't like doing this kind of stuff in a commander game, you certainly can take it out of your build. 2 black, enchantment, again with the cumulative upkeep, and that's why I put it in the deck. You pay a black and you pay 1 life. So the first time you put an age counter on it, you're going to pay 1 black and a life. The next time you're going to have to pay 2 black and 2 life. So this does get out of hand pretty quick. That's why we want to be removing the counters from it. But what does it do? If a land is tapped for mana, it produces black instead of any other type. So that means every land in play is only tapping for black mana. If your opponent's playing a mono black deck, this is probably not going to be very good against them, but for a lot of other decks, especially those multicolored decks with 3 or 4 or even 5 colors, are really going to get hosed by this. Some of your opponents might even get locked out of the game by it, and you can very easily keep this in play indefinitely by constantly removing those age counters from it. Maybe not the funnest card in the world, but it does work here. Really, really interesting commander. Like I said, it's a theme that I've been looking at for a long, long time now. I toyed with a few different color combinations. Black was the color that for sure I needed in this deck. So when I saw Glissa Sunslayer, black and a green commander that's removing counters, I'm like, there we go. Perfect commander for that theme that I've been wanting to do for so long. Really interesting deck here, I think. And of course, as usual, the deck list is in the description below. Feel free to check it out if you want to, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.